Welcome to Voices of Fitness and Bodybuilding, Episode 6, the Fitness and Bodybuilding audio magazine. I hope that you are making us your cardio or commuting companion. You may notice we added fitness to the title this time around because I think it's important to let people know that this isn't strictly a bodybuilding podcast. There are enough of those out there in my opinion, and good ones too, so I wanted to create something different with a wider appeal. If you've listened to the previous episodes, you know what I mean already. So far, people seem to be liking what we are doing, but remember, if you want to make any suggestions, please feel free to email me at mike@mikepulcinella.com or reach out to me on Facebook. Also, a reminder that VOF&B is available on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube, so there's a lot of ways you can find us. This week, our first article is guaranteed to turn your stomach. We examine cleanliness in gyms. Hint, it's not that good. And we tell you a few ways you can protect yourself. The bodybuilding article explores a question I think all of us busy people who go to the gym face, which is, when is the best time of day to train? My brother's segment is the start of a Q&A session that I feel is going to run into Episode 7. We had a lot of people submit their bodybuilding or other questions on Facebook, and we got a bunch of great responses. And our off-topic article this week examines the role that luck plays in our lives. How much of what you achieve is your doing, and how much is beyond your control? I'll read an excerpt from Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, the story of success that seems to contradict everything The Secret has taught us. The views expressed in the articles are obviously the opinions of the writers and not me. I make no claims for the veracity of the information presented, so use your head and check these things out for yourself before trying anything you hear about on VOB. And if you've never exercised before, get started. It's never too late, but be sure to check with your doctor first to see if everything is okay, which you should be doing every year anyway. Do you wash your hands after you're done in the gym? Then, do you wash your water bottle? I ask people this all the time because if you don't wash your water bottle, then you're picking up those same germs you just washed off. So how dirty are our gyms really? And is it something we should be worried about? Well, this first article is by a lab that tested several different pieces of equipment in a variety of gyms. What they found will not please you. This is by fitrated.com. FitRated does fitness equipment reviews generally, but in this particular case, they examined the germs that are found in most gyms. You go to the gym to burn calories, increase your strength, and get fit. But if you're not careful, you may come home with more than you bargained for. Though many public places can harbor various types of bacteria, fitness facilities in particular can be hotspots for germs. Every time you pick up a weight or grab an exercise bike handle, you could be putting yourself at risk for an illness or infection. We gathered bacteria samples from 27 different pieces of equipment at 3 different gyms to get an idea of how many germs you may encounter when you touch a treadmill, exercise bike, or free weight. We tested the samples we gathered to determine bacteria levels based on colony-forming units, or CFU, the number of viable bacteria cells. And it turns out the average treadmill, exercise bike, and free weight are all teeming with germs, more than 1 million per square inch apiece. All 3 types of equipment yielded gram-positive cocci, a common cause of skin infections and other illnesses. Gram-negative rods, which can prompt many types of infections and sometimes resist antibiotics, and gram-positive rods, which can, but don't often, cause other various types of infections. The exercise bikes and free weight samples also turned up bacillus, a potential cause of various conditions including ear, eye, and respiratory infections. The implication of millions of germs can be difficult to grasp. To put it in perspective, we compared the bacteria levels we found on various gym equipment with the number of germs typically found on everyday items. The average exercise bike harbors 39 times more bacteria than a cafeteria tray. Typical free weights have 362 times more germs than a toilet seat. And the treadmill you're running on averages 74 times more bacteria than a typical public bathroom faucet. Considering the sheer number of people who touch gym equipment in a facility during any given day, it should come as no surprise that the surfaces are less than spotless. So if you work out at the gym regularly, how can you protect yourself? Be sure to disinfect machines both before and after you use them. Never walk around barefoot. Don't touch your face, and always wash your hands and change out of your gym clothes immediately after a workout. Another surefire way to avoid gym germs is invest in the best home gym equipment so you can work out in the comfort of your own home. At fitrated.com, we've taken the guesswork out of choosing workout equipment. Our advice, reviews, and side-by-side comparison of treadmills, ellipticals, exercise bikes, home gyms, max trainers, tread climbers, etc. can help you find exactly what you want while spending as little as possible. So you can get fit without gym membership commitments, small talk, and a revolving door of bacteria. A little commercial for fitrated.com, but I thought that they deserved it for letting me borrow this article from them. So that's what fitrated.com has to say, and I'm sure there's more than a little scare tactics involved because they are trying to get you to buy their home gym equipment. However, this is a real concern, and I know people that have gotten some serious skin diseases from gyms. A couple of people, actually. So here on bodybuilding.com, I'm going to read another article called Keep It Clean, 6 Steps to Better Gym Hygiene by, of all people, Nicole Wilkins. We know Nicole Wilkins. This was posted on December 18th, 2015. And it actually comes from Women's Health magazine. No, it doesn't. I'm going to skip the introduction, which basically is a recap of the kind of thing that we already heard about from fitrated.com. In other words, how disgusting your gym is. Although the statistics here come from a survey done by Nuffield Health from the UK. So when they talk about the survey, they're talking about this survey conducted in the UK. So I'm going to go right to the tips themselves. Tip 1, buy a better bottle. Plastic water bottles tend to hold bacteria, says Donna Duberg, Assistant Professor of Clinical Laboratory Science at St. Louis University. The only ones you can be sure of are metal. To clean it properly, just wash it in hot soapy water. Also, keep an eye on your bottle to make sure someone, like nearly half of the people in the survey, doesn't sneak a sip while you aren't paying attention. Tip 2. Wipe, wash, repeat. Whether you decide to constantly wipe down the equipment or cleanse your own hands, or a combination of the two, keeping your hands clean can help make sure gym germs don't do any damage. Quote, keep your own little area organized and hygienic, and you're going to be protected. End quote, says Duberg. After using each machine or set of weights, use the hand sanitizer and wipes that should be provided by your gym to keep germs at bay. Tip 3. Clean your gear. Dirty, dark, moist gym bags are great for fungi. They'll grow just fine in the interior, says Duberg. There are several ways to avoid contaminating your gym bag. Put your dirty clothes in a plastic bag. Take them out and empty the plastic bag right into the washer, she says. And don't forget about your sneakers. Like your dirty clothes, slip them into a plastic bag before throwing them into your gym bag. Then, once you get home, wipe them off with a disinfecting wipe, including the bottoms, let them air dry, and toss them back in the next day, she suggests. Tip 4. Shower smarter. Although they're not completely foolproof, flip-flops will provide a barrier between you and the floors and you and the shower room, says Duberg. But take note, once they get wet in the shower, fungal spores can still get on your feet. To minimize the risk, soak your sandals in a 10% bleach solution once in a while, she says. That'll help keep them and your feet as clean and fungus-free as possible. Tip 5. Take a rest day. Don't go to the gym if you have a really bad cold and you're sneezing and your nose is running, she says. Also, if you have an open wound, you might want to stay away from the gym that day to avoid infection or infecting anything you might touch while you're working out. Tip 6. Hold off on the hot tubs. If you have an open wound, skin, or other infections, absolutely do not use jacuzzis or common pools, warns Duberg. If you do, you'll not only transmit bacteria, but you'll be more susceptible to bacteria that are already lurking in the water. It's all truly horrifying, and as fastidious as I try to be at the gym, I'm probably going to try to be a little more careful from now on. Our bodybuilding article this week comes from ironmagazine.com, and it's about workout timing. Is there a specific time of day when our bodies are primed to be the strongest or create the most muscle? Throughout my life, I've had to work out at various times of the day, from early morning to late at night, depending on my schedule, and I've always wondered if that ever made a difference. Let's see what Sean Nalawanich has to say. When is the best time to work out? Posted on ironmagazine.com, December 20th, 2016, and written by Sean Nalawanich. Is working out timing an important aspect of an effective muscle building and fat loss program, and is it something you should be specifically paying attention to? When is the best time of day to work out for maximum performance and overall results? Some trainees are happy to jump out of bed and lace up their workout shoes first thing in the morning. Others prefer to wait a few hours and hit the weights in the afternoon, while yet others are part of the evening crowd and save their workouts until later in the day. Finding the best time to work out is as much about personal preference as it is about physiology, and in this post we're going to be going over the main factors to take into account when deciding where to schedule your training sessions during the day. From a purely physiological standpoint, there technically is a best time to work out, anywhere from the late afternoon to the early mid-evening. This is due to the way that the body's circadian rhythm works and how it activates various parts of the central nervous system throughout each 24-hour period. Assuming that you have a typical sleeping and waking schedule in place, positioning your workouts at this time of day will have the following physical benefits. Core temperature will be in the proper range for optimal performance. Muscle activation, blood flow, and strength will be maximized. Joints and connective tissues will be less susceptible to injury, and reaction times will be at their peak. In terms of raw physical performance, somewhere around 2 to 3 p.m. until 8 to 9 p.m. would theoretically be the best time to train if you are wanting to fully maximize your results. If you operate on an irregular sleeping schedule, waiting about 5 to 6 hours after waking prior to hitting the gym would be ideal in order to derive the same benefits. Now, before you go rearranging your entire schedule and delaying your workouts until later in the day, keep in mind that this is not a black and white issue and that there are several other factors to take into account as well. While your body may be less physically primed for maximum performance the first thing in the morning, what if that's the specific time of day when you personally feel the most psychologically primed? The mind is a very powerful tool, and if the morning time is when you're the most pumped up, motivated, and excited to hit the weights, that alone could be enough to offset the less than ideal physical conditions, and could allow you to get in just as high quality a workout. Also keep in mind that the brain's willpower reserves tend to deplete as the day goes on, and as you become increasingly mentally fatigued. For that reason, a 6 p.m. workout could still end up being a lower quality session in comparison to a morning workout if you've been working at a stressful job from 9 to 5 and were feeling tired and burned out once the evening rolled around. There are 3 other important things to consider as well when making the case for those earlier training sessions. First off, the body will tend to adapt its circadian rhythm to the time of day that you normally work out. Begin consistently performing your training sessions at, say, 10 a.m., and your body will start gradually priming itself for maximum physical exertion at that specific time. This adaptation is not perfect. The earlier in the morning you train, the less significant the effect will be, but it certainly comes into play regardless. Secondly, research has shown that if caffeine is used as a pre-workout aid prior to morning workouts, around 150 to 300 milligrams would be a standard dose depending on your body weight. This alone can largely erase the physical drawbacks of those earlier sessions. A strong cup of coffee or a basic pre-workout stack might be all you need to boost your performance up to evening levels. Keep in mind, though, that caffeine tolerance will develop over time if used every day without cycling off. So this is still something that needs to be used in moderation to get the full benefits. Thirdly, training too late in the day can potentially interfere with sleep. Even if an 8 p.m. workout results in a better session performance-wise, the benefits may be negated, at least in part, if that later session negatively impacts recovery and mental focus leading into the next day as a result of reducing your sleep quality. As you can see, a case can be made for training at virtually any time of day, once all the various factors are taken into account. So, when should you work out in order to build muscle, lose fat, and gain strength at your full potential? In terms of practical recommendations, here's what I'd suggest doing. Recommendation number 1. If you truly have no preference on the matter, and if it's equally convenient for you to work out at any time during the day, go ahead and schedule your workouts somewhere within that late afternoon to evening time frame. This is the time of day that will be most likely to deliver the highest quality workouts, assuming you don't work a highly stressful job that interferes with your training performance. If you do work a physically and/or mentally stressful job, perform your workout in the morning or at lunch. Recommendation number 2. If you definitely do prefer early morning workouts because you feel more motivated at that time, or because it fits into your schedule more conveniently, just continue training at that time as usual. The psychological aspect may be enough on its own to allow you to match the strength and energy levels you'd feel later in the day anyway. And I wouldn't suggest going out of your way to switch your entire schedule around, unless fitness is your number one life priority and you're aware that such a switch may only produce a minor increase in results in the overall picture. The critical factor of long-term adherence should not be ignored either. In other words, if you truly enjoy morning workouts, or if training later in the day doesn't fit your schedule well, earlier morning sessions will probably still be a better overall strategy, since there's a greater chance that you'll actually stick to them over the long haul. For example, I personally am aware that I perform slightly better in the gym if I wait until later in the evening, but I still train in the morning, regardless, because I enjoy the mood-boosting effect it produces throughout the rest of the day, and because it just fits into my daily schedule in a much more streamlined manner. So what's the bottom line on workout timing? While working out later in the day should theoretically produce slightly higher quality workouts, the best time of day to work out for the average trainee will simply be the one that feels best for that particular individual, and that is most convenient. And as usual with these kinds of articles, it ends on an inconclusive note. Do what works for you. Experiment and find out for yourself. I mean, that's always the final answer with a lot of this stuff. There really are no hard and fast rules, much of the time. As Sean says in the article, the problem is that for many of us, our schedules don't give us much of a choice of training time. I remember for myself years ago when I was freshly divorced and had joint custody of my daughter. The only time I could head to the gym was about 9 o'clock at night after I put her to bed. She was about 8 years old at the time and we were living with my dad, so I could do that. So I would read her a bedtime story, tuck her in, and then get changed for my workout. It wasn't ideal, and it took me a while to get used to working out that late. I did have some sleep problems at first, but it was better than nothing. And I think that's the bottom line. Any workout is better than no workout. I mean, if you have the luxury of picking your time, great, but if not, just get it done whenever you can. So now we come to the part of the podcast that I know you're all waiting for, the Q&A with my brother Dave.
We're all waiting for something interesting.
We're waiting for something interesting.
Damn it.
But first, we have a few corrections. Dave, you've been listening to the podcast, and you noticed a couple things I got wrong.
I did. I heard a couple things that were wrong on your last podcast. I think it was the pronunciation thing.
What? Do you remember what it was?
You mispronounced Royce Gracie.
That is correct.
You said Royce Gracie, and I couldn't believe you said that.
That is correct. I know it's Royce Gracie. My only excuse is that I'm so paying so much attention to the technical aspects of what I'm doing, not only the recording of it, but my own voice. Am I keeping it in the right register and all that kind of stuff, that you start to not even comprehend the words you're saying sometimes. And so I was just going along.
Reading other people's stuff, I guess.
Yeah. But the other one you said was that I was mispronouncing the word steroids as steroids.
Yeah.
Is that incorrect?
Well, it's not incorrect, but saying steroids as opposed to steroids is indicative of how a newbie who doesn't understand that much about them and who has just heard the word says it.
What I think was happening there.
That.
Say that again?
If you remember, you and I used to make fun of people who said steroid.
Yes.
It's all from their steroids that they're taking. You know, we used to make fun and put on the beginner voice and do that. And now you're actually doing it.
Well, what I think is happening is that we've used that joking pronunciation for so long that I adopted it without even realizing it.
So yeah,
kind of like the word for the 25-cent word for when things are really noisy and chaotic is cacophony. And we used to pronounce it as cacophony because it was just funnier that way. And I actually said that in front of someone one time. Oh, all the cacophony in this room. And that's pronounced cacophony. And I felt so stupid because I know that. And I just sort of got caught up in the funny way that we say things and totally forgot about that. So I think that's what was happening with steroids. And you'll hear in the podcast, I think I slip a couple of times and still say steroids, but I've been trying to correct it.
By the way, what made you decide that you wanted to do a piece on Royce Gracie anyway?
Well, it was the off-topic piece, and I like this writer, philosopher guy who wrote the piece. I think he's really interesting, and this was kind of off-topic for him because he usually talks about politics and religion, and here he was talking about his experiences in jiu-jitsu, and because he is so intelligent and such a philosopher, they were a little deeper than most and kind of interesting, especially the fact that people can fool themselves. Like there was this one master who had fooled himself into thinking he was invincible.
Right.
And he pulls that all apart, and it's really interesting. So it was just my, whatever I find interesting, I put in the off topic.
It was just kind of random.
Yeah. Well, that's the off topic. It's random. It's whatever I find interesting that's not about bodybuilding.
Makes sense.
That's what it is. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the Q&A. This is we've asked for questions from our listeners, from our friends, and we've got a bunch of questions. We probably could just fire these off real quick, or not. If you've got a long answer, that's fine too.
I usually do.
We're going to start with a question that was actually posted on YouTube from IKC589. Very catchy name.
Sure. That's
he was genuinely excited when I said I would ask you these questions. So I guess he's a subscriber to my YouTube channel.
Right.
Which, by the way, just so everyone knows, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel to hear the podcast. You can go to SoundCloud to hear it. And, of course, you can go to iTunes and search for Voices of Bodybuilding. And it's under the Project Bodybuilding heading. We're just grouped together with all the Project Bodybuilding podcasts for right now anyway.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. He asked two questions, IKC589. If Dave could go back in time to the first time he decided he would be a bodybuilder, what would he do differently? I mean everything as far as training, approach to PEDs, diet, prehab, rehab, etc. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a quick answer, but go ahead.
No, and I've given this thought before. There are a few things that I would have done differently. you're never aware of the timeline when you're going through it. Like, this is finite. It's not going to last forever. You have this window, and it's going to shut one day. So you got to get it all in when your body is fresh and when it can do the things that you're asking it to do and go through the rigors that you're asking it to go through. I think you'll agree with me that I waited a little too long to really get serious about it. I got super serious about it when I kind of felt the window starting to close right around 38. When I made my comeback and did the Delaware and East Coast and won that and then decided to do nationals. And you, thank God, started filming that. So it's captured. But truth be told, I should have done all that and really put together the ultimate plan and really pushed my body in my, I'd say, late 20s, early 30s. Not late 30s, early 40s.
I thought you were pushing yourself in your 20s and 30s. I mean, you were hitting some pretty big contests.
I was, but if you look at pictures, I mean, dude, I went up from 2003 to 2004. I went up 2 weight classes. Mm-hmm. I went from a light heavyweight at 190, I believe 6 it was. I wasn't at the top of the light heavyweights, to the bottom of the super heavyweights in one season. That's pushing the envelope. Although I was very much into bodybuilding in my 20s and 30s, it was still a hobby for me. Not to mention the fact that I didn't know, and this is the other thing that I would change, I didn't know what was necessary in terms of the chemistry, in terms of the training, in terms of the diet. I didn't know because I didn't do one key thing that I should have done. And this was early in my career. I should have, and I didn't. This is one of my regrets. Pick the brains of the true minds in the sport. Not just the bros who already have big arms because they're Timmy and they drink beer and it turns into arms. Not those people. Not the people who just have great genetics and cut out their chocolate cake 2 weeks out before a show and they look fucking great. Not those people. And although I love Kenny and he was instrumental in me becoming what I was in the sport, he was still just a bro who was just experimenting on himself and had this immense and intense and amazing work ethic. So I got caught up in his slipstream, which I'm so thankful for. But if I had to do over again, I would actually seek out the top guys with the top minds, with the scientific knowledge, who were on the cutting edge of the cycles and where to get the right stuff. And it's just all about talking to the right people, which I never did. I was always a recluse at these shows. I always stayed to myself, was in my room, and I never talked to anybody, and I'll figure it out. It's like, I know who's going to know my body better than me? I'll figure it out was always my mantra. And it served me well for years. I won so many shows doing it that way. But what could I have been?
It seems to me that it should be a lot easier for young bodybuilders now through the internet to get that information. But I'm thinking maybe it's not, because there are so many people out there promoting themselves as experts that you get conflicting information a lot of the time.
Yeah, you nailed it. You're not getting the right information. You're getting that person's information. There are very, very, very few, and I know who they are, people in this industry who are actual upright people and actually are responsible for the product they put out or the service they put out and are really trying to do right by their clients. You can count them on one fucking hand, dude.
Do you want to name some names?
John Meadows for one. Johnny Castellina for another. There are a few more. But these are people who are really trying to put together something of quality. And I would trust anything they say. And with John, I trust the products he puts out. He's not putting junk out. He's not mislabeling stuff. He's not spiking the aminos or any shit like that.
How do you know that, though?
Because I've looked into it. And if you get entrenched enough in this industry, you kind of end up knowing what's going on through the grapevine. You know the good, you know the bad, you know the ugly. You hear it. It's like anything else. It's like if I do a shitty job in Delaware, that gets out really quick. If I do a great job in Delaware, that gets out really quick. It's not too long before all of your customers will know if you're shitty or you're good just by being entrenched in the industry.
Okay. Well, then I want to ask the second part of his question now, which is basically the same thing, but expanded to all the other aspects of your life outside of bodybuilding. What would you do differently?
Let me follow up on saying that this stuff is tested, which is the only way to know if the products are good. And obviously that's the bottom line.
Oh, and you have a friend who works in a lab.
If your stuff is tested, no, John's stuff has been tested.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant you tested it yourself.
Yeah, that's the litmus test right there. It doesn't. Enough said. Mm-hmm. You know, if the lab tests come out to be what's on the label, you're done. It's a done deal. Good.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now, what's the question?
So the second part of his question is, again, if you could go back in time to 18 years old or so, what would you do differently in all the other aspects of your life outside of bodybuilding, your career and your romantic relationships? What would you do differently knowing what you know now?
Romantic relationships, I wouldn't go ahead and live with my girlfriends like I did. Big mistake. I would move in. I would start seeing someone and then move in with them. And then every fucking time I ended up trapped with someone who, as I got to know them, I realized I shouldn't be living with them. So I would change that.
Could you have gotten to know them without living with them?
And that's the conundrum right there. Can you? You know, to a degree. But when you're dating someone and you don't live with them, they can always be on their best behavior.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I was always shacking up, though. I mean, I was so young, and then I was nowhere near wanting to get married. I don't know why I did that. I just did it. I would change that. I would also change some of the choices I made with some of the people I got involved with. I was choosing before you know who you are. You're choosing people based on the wrong criterion, and you know, it leads to some bad situations. Mm-hmm. Professionally, you know, and I always thought about, you know, perhaps I should have pursued my music more passionately than I did, but there's no way that would have happened. There's no way that would have happened because as soon as I would start doing that, it would take away from my routine with my bodybuilding, which was always my priority. It was just the thing that was ingrained in my psyche that I wanted to do and had to succeed at. And although music was a passion as well, it just didn't have that same place.
I think there are certain goals that require a 100% commitment. And so that in the case of bodybuilding versus music, it would have to be an either or kind of thing.
And it's exactly what ended up happening. So what would happen is there would be a tug of war between these two things always in my life. I remember being at the gym and just drifting off between sets, listening to a song that was on the radio and figuring out what key it was in.
I know.
You focus back on your workout, you're going to lose your pump. So they were always fighting each other, you know what I mean? And if you remember, what would end up happening would be after the show season was over, and I was kind of idle for a while, giving myself a rest, I would always pour myself into my music for the off season, and then come back to bodybuilding late. So there was always this, you know, ebb and flow with both of them going.
In a future episode, I'm gonna, for the off-topic article, I do a piece by Malcolm Gladwell, who's the guy that popularized the idea that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to get really good at something.
At anything. Right.
And what he points out is that 10,000 hours is a lot. It's not just a lot, it's a lot of time.
It is.
And that you can only do that if you're in a very fortuitous situation. And you have to put yourself in a situation where you can devote inordinate amounts of time to this thing. Do you think you've spent 10,000 hours on bodybuilding?
I was just going to ask that. I wonder if I have. Like in the gym. Well, if you're just talking about in the gym, or are you talking about...
No, because...
With everything related to bodybuilding, I guarantee I passed that a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is you have to start very early. And he was talking about hockey players, you know, superior star hockey players. Well, they start like when they're 5 years old.
Sure.
So that by the time you're 30 years old, you've put in tens of thousands of hours.
Well, as you know, I was 12 in the basement gym doing actual 1 to 2 hour long workouts.
Right.
So it starts there, and then think about the hours of cardio that I've done throughout the years. Each one an hour session, sometimes 2 a day.
Yeah.
So
I would say that applies to music as well. I mean, look at our favorite classical pianist these days, the Chinese prodigy, Yu Wang. She was 4 years old or 5 years old when she started.
Yep. She's on the piano all fucking day.
All day.
She does. That's all she does, which is why she's her.
Yeah, I know. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to move on to the next question?
Sure.
This next one probably could go fast. Maybe not. Let's see. This is from Facebook, from Danny Carlin. Thanks, Danny. How often should I change my workout routine? That is a good question. I know it gets asked a lot, but it's a good question. How long does it take to get stale?
You really don't have to, and the whole stale thing is up in the air as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, really?
Once you have a set number of exercises that you really feel in the muscle belly, they don't hurt you, they work really well, you can just mix them up within the order that you're doing them, or ensure that over time you're adding weight, you're adding resistance, you're adding intensity, or you're changing the intensity some way, either with drop sets or a superset. You don't have to change the workout up completely just for the sake of change. You really don't.
I get it.
However, the personal training industry has dictated that you have to, every 6 weeks, completely revamp your workout to completely different exercises from a completely different plane. And I'm not saying it's not without merit. It's just not absolutely necessary. However, if you think about it from a business standpoint, they're trying to keep a client needing them. So every 6 weeks, if you have to have a completely different workout every 6 weeks, you're going to need that personal trainer to do that.
Yes, you're going to need him to help you balance on top of the ball, that rubber
That's
ball.
I was headed next. You also have to throw a ball at you. You have to have exercises that you can't do by yourself. You have to have someone throw a ball at you to do it. So that way you keep the personal trainer. Or you can't do leg raises and just raise your leg and lower it. You have to have someone throw your feet back down to the floor.
Well, having a good workout partner that can help you intensify certain parts of the workout is a good thing, but it's not really that necessary.
Right. I just don't believe in the rule where there's X amount of weeks that go by and you have to change. What if you have this workout where every movement that and this is what I ended up developing for myself, was a workout where every movement I felt exactly where I wanted it to. And all I really needed to do was ensure that I took that movement to failure every time and made it progressive in that over time I was using more and more weight with the same amount of reps in good form. What if you have that workout and then all of a sudden 6 weeks comes along and you just have to trash all those movements and start over with movements that your body's not effective at doing? You don't have the mind to muscle communication, the neural connection with that muscle at that point. So now you're like a beginner again, and now you have to spend a period of time getting ineffective workouts because that movement's not really annihilating that muscle like the old set of exercises were.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So that's how I feel about it.
His next question is one of those questions I've heard a million times, and I remember even asking it to Kai Greenback when I was working with him, and he danced around it. Because I really don't think there is any good way. Well, not to say there's no good way to do this. It's just that there's only one way to do this, and everyone knows what it is. Lagging body parts. How do I bring them up?
Actually, there's not just one way.
You do just a lot of stuff for them, more than the other stuff. No?
Not really, and that's one of the theories is that to bring up a lagging body part, you can do more frequency. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. I have never done that. Like, I've never done arms 3 times a week. I just didn't see the point. And instinctually, I just felt like that wouldn't work for me. I felt like that would take away from my other workouts. Because I'm the kind of guy who's in the gym for an hour. I bust my fucking ass to the point where after an hour, I can't do an ancillary body part like biceps and give it any meaning whatsoever. So if I do back, I'm not doing fucking biceps at the end of back. There's no way. I'm just dragging myself back to the office and slumping in my chair. So like doing biceps after this and triceps after that, in the interest of getting half-ass arms in 3 times a week, to me was not a way to bring them up. So on arm day, I would just smash my arms just like I did every other body part. And they were my weak point. But I'll tell you this, and this has zero scientific backing. Zero. The only thing that really brought up my arms and shoulders where it was site injecting.
I was just going to say that as a joke.
Yeah, no, it really was. It really was. When I had met Telly, the only body parts I had ever hit were my glutes. And, of course, I had a monstrous ass.
Right.
Okay.
Added to by the natural genetics in our family.
Exactly. There's no doubt that there was genetics there, but for God's sake, it was just monstrous. Out of proportion with everything else. So, no, he had those huge arms and shoulders, and he never did glute shots. He always did arms and shoulder shots. He's like, bro, you fucking, you just hit your glutes. You want to bring your arms and shoulders up, you put it right in your arms. You put it right in your biceps, right in your triceps. You put it right in your shoulders. It won't take long before they come up. I'm like, Telly, there's no science behind that. That's not how steroids work. That's not how any of this works. He's like, bro, trust me. You put it in your arms. You put it in your fucking delts. And I'm looking at his arms and delts. I'm like, I can't argue with that. You know, obviously it worked for him, or else he just has big arms and shoulders. So I'm like, but the steroids work systemically. Telly, you know what that means? What word means? In other words, you put it in there and it goes in your bloodstream and it goes everywhere. He goes, bro, you can either trust me or don't have to trust me if you don't want to fucking trust me. So I started mixing it up. I started going glute, delt, and then bicep. And I'll be goddamned if that didn't work. And it was the one thing. There are pictures of my arms where they are pushing 21 inches. And that was at the height of when I was doing that. Training the same, but just site injecting.
Is it the inflammation from the injection in that area?
Part of it is, but my theory is, and of course this is half-baked as fuck, that, you know, the cells that it hits the first receptors, rather, that the gear hits are going to get the best bang for your buck. And even as I say this, I sound like an asshole.
Bro science. We make no claims for the scientific accuracy of this show, and I have a disclaimer up at the front, so say whatever the hell you want.
It's awful. But I mean, I can't come up with anything else, but I know that if you look at that picture of me that I posted recently where I'm on the stage looking like I'm looking for my glasses.
Yeah.
My delts are the size of my head.
Yeah.
They didn't have that fullness and size ever until I did the one thing, and that one thing was what Telly told me to do.
Okay.
So science, schmience.
Alrighty then.
Say this.
Telly was and is quite a character, and if any of you have not seen Raising the Bar 1, Dave and my documentary with Telly in it, who kind of stole the show a few times,
yes,
you can get it on MikePulcinella.com as a rather inexpensive download.
The scene where he paints me and tans me the night before the show, priceless.
Classic and awkward. It's one of those moments when I was shooting when I go when you know you're getting a little gem. You're shooting, you're going, this is great. This is so great.
Right?
And people have to see it to believe it.
All right, here's a shameless plug for me right now.
Go.
I am getting, as we speak, a time-sensitive text from a client who's at the GNC right now and doesn't know which choice to make.
Handle it. So let's continue to record and tell us what you're doing.
I'm answering her right now.
What's the question?
All right. I'm at GNC. What is the dose you recommend for dandelion root?
That's a Q&A.
Right.
It counts.
I know. I'm going to give her something because she's not going to be using it for just a short period of time. I'm going to give her something.
What is she using dandelion root for?
She has a very acute sensitivity to salt. And since she doesn't eat much salt during her normal, week of dieting, when she goes to a cheat meal and takes in all of a sudden relatively a lot of salt in relation to what she normally takes, goes right up, and it's usually a few days before her weigh-in, and she comes in with all this water on her. So I said, well, you know what? If you do that and you're holding all that water, run a few days of dandelion root. It's a natural diuretic. It'll take some of that water off you. You won't feel so bloated. You won't want to come in here and be miserable, and your weight will reflect that. So I'm giving her the dosage right now.
Okay.
And I can't tell you what that is because then I'd have to kill everyone.
Well, that's what they have to pay you for.
Pay me.
While you're doing that, I'll say Dave has a website called pulseadvancednutrition.com, and he can train you remotely. There's a lot of commercials on this one today. Mm-hmm. Hey, why the hell not?
We're really bad.
But yeah, Dave has trains a lot of people remotely or in person, and you can find out all about it on pulseadvancednutrition.com.
Why, thank you, Michael.
Yes. Well, what good is doing all these podcasts if we don't get a little bit of business out of it, right?
Oh, right. Hey, so what happens if I have to pee?
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? We've done about 26 minutes, and that's pretty much what I wanted to do for this episode. And as I thought, this was going to roll over into the next episode. So we'll pick it up in episode 7 with more Q&A from Dave Pulcinella. Go pee.
Sweet.
And I'll check you, and we'll pick it up next time.
All right.
By now, you all should be familiar with The Secret. It's a pseudo-mystical book and a movie that claims that all you have to do is put your mind to something and the universe will make it happen. Well, I'm not so sure if it's the universe making things happen or not, but the practical takeaway from that book is that if you can visualize something you want long and hard enough, you can get it, as long as you translate that vision into hard work. And that's the part most people miss, the hard work. They just expect things to materialize by magic, but it don't work that way. Now, I blame the makers of The Secret for wrapping what is really a practical lesson in mystical, magical bullshit. I mean, watch or read it if you haven't already. It's still really helpful, but try to delete the quasi-religious aspect of it. So anyway, in one way or another, I'm sure we've all been told at one time that you can be whatever you want to be if you work hard enough at it. And to a certain extent, that is true. With enough time, focus, and devotion, most goals can be achieved. I mean, if you've seen any of my videos with Kai Green, you already know the philosophy that I'm talking about. You visualize the kind of success you want and then work like hell for a long time to make it happen. But work for how long? Malcolm Gladwell is the writer who helped popularize the notion that it takes at least 10,000 hours of practice in order to be great at anything. And that may be true, but as he explains in his book OUTLIERS, it takes a lot more than that. And some of it is completely out of our hands. So I'm going to read an excerpt from OUTLIERS, The Story of Success by Malcolm Gladwell. And this is from Chapter 2. This is about the 10,000-hour rule. Now, I am considerably condensing this quite a bit. I'm actually doing it a great disservice. I'm going to try to do my best to get the idea across to you, because this is really just one piece of a puzzle in a big thesis that this entire book puts forward. So I'm just giving you a little taste of what he's talking about here, and hopefully if you're interested, if it piques your interest at all, you'll go to the book and read the full version, because I'm really cutting it down here. The first thing I need you to know as background is that he establishes before this chapter that it looks as if hockey players, young hockey players, like peewee hockey players, who are born toward the beginning of the year seem to have an advantage over those born later in the year, for reasons that he puts forward very interestingly in the book, and I think you should read that. But what I'm about to read references back to that, so you need to know that. For almost a generation, psychologists around the world have been engaged in a spirited debate over a question that most of us would consider to have been settled long ago. The question is this: is there such a thing as innate talent? Well, the obvious answer is yes. Not every hockey player born in January ends up playing at the professional level. Only some do, the innately talented ones. Achievement is talent plus preparation. The problem with this view is that the closer psychologists look at the careers of the gifted, the smaller the role innate talent seems to play, and the bigger the role preparation seems to play. The psychologist K. Anders Ericsson and his colleagues compared amateur pianists with professional pianists, and a certain pattern emerged. The amateurs never practiced more than about 3 hours a week over the course of their childhood, and by the age of 20 they had totaled 2,000 hours of practice. The professionals, on the other hand, steadily increased their practice time every year, until by the age of 20 they had reached 10,000 hours. The striking thing about Ericsson's study is that he and his colleagues couldn't find any naturals, musicians who floated effortlessly to the top while practicing a fraction of the time their peers did. Nor could they find any grinds, people who worked harder than everyone else, yet just didn't have what it takes to break the top ranks. Their research suggests that once a musician has enough ability to get into the top music school, the thing that distinguishes one performer from another is how hard he or she works. That's it. And what's more, the people at the very top don't work just harder, or even much harder than everyone else. They work much, much harder. Quote, "The emerging picture from such studies is that 10,000 hours of practice is required to achieve the level of mastery associated with being a world-class expert in anything," writes the neurologist Daniel Levitin. Quote, "In study after study of composers, basketball players, fiction writers, ice skaters, concert pianists, chess players, master criminals, and what have you, this number comes up again and again. Of course, this doesn't address why some people get more out of their practice sessions than others. But no one has yet found a case in which true, world-class expertise was accomplished in less time. It seems that it takes the brain this long to assimilate all that it needs to know to achieve true mastery." And this is true even of people we think of as prodigies. Mozart, for example, famously started writing music at 6. But, writes the psychologist Michael Howe in his book Genius Explained, by the standards of mature composers, Mozart's early works are not outstanding. The earliest pieces were all probably written down by his father and perhaps improved in the process. Many of Wolfgang's childhood compositions, such as the first 7 of his concertos for piano and orchestra, are largely arrangements of works by other composers. Of those concertos that only contain music original to Mozart, the earliest that is now regarded as a masterwork, number 9, was not composed until he was 21. By that time, Mozart had already been composing concertos for 10 years. The music critic Harold Schonberg goes further. Mozart, he argues, actually developed late, since he didn't produce his greatest work until he had been composing for more than 20 years. To become a chess grandmaster also seems to take about 10 years. Only the legendary Bobby Fischer got to that elite level in less than that amount of time. It took him 9 years. And what's 10 years? Well, it's roughly how long it takes to put in 10,000 hours of hard practice. 10,000 hours is the magic number of greatness. The other interesting thing about that 10,000 hours, of course, is that 10,000 hours is an enormous amount of time. It's all but impossible to reach that number all by yourself by the time you're a young adult. You have to have parents who encourage and support you. You can't be poor, because if you have to hold down a part-time job on the side to help make ends meet, there won't be time left in the day to practice enough. In fact, most people can reach that number only if they get into some kind of special program, like a hockey all-star squad, or if they get into some kind of extraordinary opportunity that gives them a chance to put in those hours. So is the 10,000-hour rule really a general rule of success? If we scratch below the surface of every great achiever, do we always find the equivalent of the concert pianist or the hockey all-star team? Some sort of special opportunity for practice. Let's take, as an example, one of the most famous rock bands ever. The Beatles, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr came to the United States in February of 1964, starting the so-called British invasion of the American music scene and putting out a string of hit records that transformed the face of popular music. The first interesting thing about the Beatles, for our purposes, is how long they had already been together by the time they reached the United States. Lennon and McCartney first started playing together in 1957, 7 years prior to landing in America. Incidentally, the time that elapsed between their founding and their arguably greatest artistic achievements, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and the Beatles' White Album, is 10 years. And if you look even more closely at those long years of preparation, you'll find an experience that, in the context of hockey players and world-class pianists, sounds awfully familiar. In 1960, while they were still just a struggling high school rock band, they were invited to play in Hamburg, Germany. Quote, Hamburg in those days did not have rock and roll music clubs. It had strip clubs, says Philip Norman, who wrote the Beatles' biography, Shout. Quote, there was one particular club owner called Bruno, who was originally a fairground showman. He had the idea of bringing in rock groups to play in various clubs. They had this formula. It was a huge, non-stop show, hour after hour, with a lot of people lurching in and the other lot lurching out. And the bands would play all the time to catch the passing traffic. In an American red light district, they would call it non-stop striptease. Many of the bands that played in Hamburg were from Liverpool, Norman went on. It was an accident. Bruno went to London to look for bands, but he happened to meet an entrepreneur from Liverpool in Soho who was down in London by pure chance, and he arranged to send some bands over. That's how the connection was established. And eventually the Beatles made a connection not just with Bruno, but with other club owners as well. They kept going back because they got a lot of alcohol and a lot of sex. End quote. And what was so special about Hamburg? It wasn't that it paid well. It didn't. Or that the acoustics were fantastic. They weren't. Or that the audiences were savvy and appreciative. They were anything but. It was the sheer amount of time the band was forced to play. Here's John Lennon, in an interview after the Beatles disbanded, talking about the band's performance at a Hamburg strip club called the Indra. We got better and got more confidence. We couldn't help it with all the experience playing all night long. It was handy them being foreign. We had to try even harder, put our heart and soul into it to get ourselves over. In Liverpool, we'd only ever done 1 hour sessions, and we used to do our best numbers, the same ones, at every one. In Hamburg, we had to play for 8 hours, so we really had to find a new way of playing. 8 hours? Here's Pete Best, the Beatles drummer at the time. Once the news got out about that we were making a show, the club started packing them in. We played 7 nights a week. At first we played almost non-stop till 12:30 when it closed. But as we got better, the crowd stayed till 2 most mornings. 7 days a week? The Beatles ended up traveling to Hamburg 5 times between 1960 and the end of 1962. On the first trip, they played 106 nights, 5 or more hours a night. On their second trip, they played 92 times. On their third trip, they played 48 times, for a total of 172 hours on stage. The last 2 Hamburg gigs, in November and December of 1962, involved another 90 hours of performing. All told, they performed for 270 nights in just over a year and a half. By the time they had their first burst of success in 1964, in fact, they had performed live an estimated 1,200 times. Do you know how extraordinary that is? Most bands today don't perform 1,200 times in their entire careers. The Hamburg Crucible is one of the things that set the Beatles apart. Quote, "They were no good on stage when they went there, and they were very good when they came back," Norman went on. They learned not only stamina, they had to learn an enormous amount of numbers, cover versions of everything you can think of, not just rock and roll, and a bit of jazz too. They weren't disciplined on stage at all before that, but when they came back, they sounded like no one else. It was the making of them. The Beatles, for the most random of reasons, got invited to go to Hamburg. Without Hamburg, the Beatles might well have taken a different path. So many outliers that we've looked at were the beneficiaries of some kind of unusual opportunity. Lucky breaks don't seem like the exception with concert pianists and rock bands and star athletes. They seem like the rule. And again, I'm cutting out a lot there. I mean, that chapter actually contrasts what happens with the Beatles with what happened with Bill Gates and what made him a success. It's really fascinating, but it's a little too long and complex for this podcast. I just want to know, did you find that inspiring or disheartening? Personally, I've experienced both things in my life, the hard work and the luck, both good and bad, that led me to becoming a documentary filmmaker working with the top-level bodybuilders like Kai Green, so I know what Malcolm says is true. But before you give up on your dreams because you don't think you'll get the breaks you need, try to remember this. If you get that good luck or that break and you haven't been working obsessively in preparation for it, that luck will pass you by. Plus, you never know, the break you get might not be the one you thought you'd get. I didn't set out to do what I'm doing today. It was kind of a surprise. And it just turned out that all the things that I had been obsessively applying myself to all my life from when I was in high school, art, like music and journalism, etc., were preparing me for that big break to become a videographer. So as corny as it sounds, you should follow your passions, get really good at what you do, better than anyone. And something, maybe not the thing you expect, but something, will surely present itself. Thanks for listening to Voices of Bodybuilding. Just a reminder that you can send me articles to be considered for this podcast at mike@mikepulcinella.com. They can be articles you find or pieces you write yourself. So till next time, stay active and stay healthy.